Hi, I'm Glenn Everett, master of machines. We're at the NASCAR Hall of Fame in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's a whole world of NASCAR history here, so let's go inside and check it out. So Buzz, thanks for having us here. Can you tell us a little bit about the NASCAR Hall of Fame? What is it all about?
Well, the NASCAR Hall of Fame was opened in May of 2010. It's a $200 million project. It's set in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is really the heart of NASCAR world, if you will. About 98% of all the teams are within a 50-mile radius. And NASCAR is really, it's developed into a world-class sport. What we try to do is capture the entire history of the sport, the 65-year history, and then even go beyond.
Can you touch on the history of NASCAR and just give the viewers a bit of an idea of where it all started?
Certainly. Bill France Sr., who founded NASCAR, was born in Washington, D.C., was a mechanic, drove in the early races in the D.C. area, and then he moved to Daytona Beach in 1934. He immediately got involved in the local racing circuits around Daytona Beach, and he realized that racing could be a very, very big thing if it was organized. He was a driver. He was on the bad end of business deals where the promoters would run off with the money and he wouldn't get paid and all this sort of thing. So he promoted a race in 1938, and it was a very big success. And he said, this is pretty good, you know, I think I'll cut back on my driving and see if we can get some organization to the sport. So he brought the best of the sport, all the best drivers, mechanics, promoters. They all agreed it was a great idea, founded NASCAR.
Absolutely fantastic to be here. Can you tell us what this area is here? And you can start with this car here if you like.
Sure. This is Glory Road, and it starts at 0 degrees of banking on this end of the road, and it gradually winds up to 33 degrees of banking on the far side, and that replicates every turn in NASCAR racing. And we have a kind of an evolution through the 6 generations of NASCAR, starting with the first super duper car of NASCAR, the Hudson Hornet, the fabulous Hudson Hornet, and made famous again through the movie Cars. But this was a flathead 6-cylinder engine with dual carburetors. They were allowed to run the duals since it was legal, since it was over the counter piece. And anyway, it blew away all the V8s until around 1955. It could not be beat.
So Buzz, tell me about this 57 Chevy here.
This car was part of a factory-backed team. General Motors came out with this model, special high performance, and it was called the Black Widow, and there was a fleet of these that raced in NASCAR in 1957. Buck Baker won the 1957 NASCAR championship with this car. And if you notice on the wheels, there's 6 lug nuts. They use the suspension and the rear axles from a GMC truck. And a little extra safety, a little extra, kind of high performance parts there. Although they were still stock, you could not modify them with, aftermarket pieces. They had to be over-the-counter pieces. But that was one of the very first factory efforts in NASCAR.
And Buzz, tell us about this car here, this Ford.
Oh, this Ford is a 1961 Ford Starliner, and it was produced right after the opening of the super speedway era. The big tracks, Atlanta, Charlotte, Daytona. And as you notice, the beautiful sloping roofline of this car, this is when American manufacturers really started paying attention to aerodynamics and how much a part it played in NASCAR racing on those big tracks. You wanted to try to drop your drag as much as you possibly could. So they were coming up with very, very nice, just beautiful, beautiful flowing lines of these cars. And they worked very well on the big speedways. And
what power plant was under the hood of this car?
This one here, it's 375 horsepower, but it was actually a 390. You hadn't gotten into the big 427s and things yet, but you were still using a fairly large engine, but they were kind of heavy too. And in the next generation, they realized that you could lighten them up a little bit, still make them very powerful.
Now, Buzz, here's a car that I believe had a lot of controversy in its day.
Controversy, that's the key word. Yes, this is known as Junior Johnson's Yellow Banana. The reason it's a banana is, of course, it's yellow, and it's got the drop nose, it's got the swept up rear quarter sections. The windshield has been laid back drastically. The roof was chopped. In fact, Fred Lorenzen had to mount the seat on the floor so he could get in the car. Highly, highly modified. And NASCAR, that's not what NASCAR was all about. But Ford was on strike at the time. They were upset about some rules that NASCAR had come out with, and NASCAR was trying to get some Fords to race. So this is a good way to get Ford back in and generate controversy too. Because of this particular car, the template grid that is used in inspection now it is still being used today. It's all because of that car right there. That's the one where NASCAR said, we better start looking at those bodies here. Something don't look right, So they implemented the template system, and it went just from a couple of wooden templates now to this gigantic grid that they use on the cars, and trying to keep everybody honest.
In the day, also in the 60s and early 70s, they used that drop nose trick in the Trans Am series as well, and effectively they were trying to get that car to slip through the air quicker. It was all about aerodynamics, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, aerodynamics was vital. In fact, even today, that's one of the only advantages you're going to get.
And Buzz, I believe there was a bit of a turning point with some rule changes with this car here in this year.
Yes, there was. And up until the banana car here, NASCAR had what was considered the first generation of NASCAR race car, meaning stock bodies, stock frames, stock engines, a little bit of modification in the final years of that generation because of the super speedway era, and you needed special wheels, things like that. But this car here, this was a unibody car, meaning that your front chassis clip was here, your rear chassis clip was here, and then the car kind of held the two together. The car acted as the connector. Well, there was no way you could race a car like that. Way too much flexing in the car, so they had to piece a piece of chassis between the front and the rear clips, and that became the very first step to hand-built chassis. You still had to use the stock components here in the front and rear, but that was a major turning point for NASCAR.
So Buzz, this Torino here, I believe this could be possibly the holy grail of this collection here?
Definitely one of them, yes. This is a Holman & Moody Torino Cobra. David Pearson drove it to the 1969 NASCAR Championship. He also won the 1968 championship in a nearly identical car. But look at the aerodynamics of this car. You've got that long sloping roof, and you got a little bit of a spoiler on the back. That was all you were allowed at the time. Now they got those big things on the back. But the nose was the key to this car. It had that drop nose. It was an extension of the 1968 front end. Instead of having that flat nose, this had the little drop nose. And this was in the midst of what was called the Aero Wars, which was Ford against Chrysler. Chrysler came out in late 1969 with the Dodge Daytona with the long nose, the great big wing on the back. In 1970, they brought out the Plymouth Superbird, which was its counterpart. But it was a major, major war between Ford Motor Company with their Fords and Mercurys and Chrysler Corporation with their Dodges and Plymouths. And that started in September of '69 at Talladega with the opening of the Talladega Speedway. And then it lasted all through the 1970 season. So it was very entertaining.
And did this vehicle here actually sport the Big Boss 429?
Oh yes, yeah, right there on the hood it says 429, and what a monster! It was a monster engine.
Were effectively designed to compete with the 426 Hemi, weren't they?
Absolutely, yeah, they certainly were. Yeah, it was a real kind of a neck and neck competition there. Everybody was trying to figure out how are we going to beat the other guy. In 1974, they did away with the big blocks altogether, and everybody had to run under 360 cubic inches. But they were still able to get that much power and that much speed out of those smaller engines. It's amazing.
This is a famous number in the NASCAR scene. Number 43, Richard Petty. Tell us about this car.
Oh, yeah, well, arguably the most famous number in the sport. He has the most all-time wins, 200. The second guy, the guy in second place in wins is David Pearson. He has 105. So Richard has nearly twice as many as anyone else. This is the first year he went to Chevrolet. He had been racing with Chrysler Corporation for years and years and years, and Chrysler really didn't have anything that was competitive. So he had an opportunity to go with General Motors. He's got this Monte Carlo, and he won his last championship actually in this car in '79, and that is a big car. Holy cow, that hood is just, when you're sitting in that driver's seat, I can't imagine having to parallel park one of these things. That hood is amazing. You could probably build a whole car out of metal that's in that hood right there. But that was one of the biggest cars I've ever seen. And it looked like it would be a rather kind of unwieldy, but it was extremely competitive. And anybody who drove those cars, Cale Yarborough, Darrell Waltrip, any of those guys, they all did very, very well with that great big old Monte Carlo.
So obviously this vehicle used the good old small block Chevy engine platform. What sort of power outputs were they making in the day in race trim?
Yeah, well, they were still running the 358, and they would get about 650 horsepower out of that. Pretty remarkable. And when you think about the basis of that engine, it was debuted in 1955, and they still were using it. I mean, even years beyond this. The small block Chevy engine is arguably the most successful engine ever built.
Well, effectively, the engine base itself, that small block Chevy, was virtually the same as that Black Widow 57 Chevy engine right through to this modern era with increased capacity.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that same engine. This is the banking of Talladega Superspeedway. Currently, that is the highest degree of banking in all of NASCAR.
Can we test it out?
Well, let's give it a shot. You don't want to do this after a night of heavy drinking. Okay?
That's amazing, isn't it?
A little tough on the ankles there.
Stay tuned for our next episode to see part 2 of our feature on this incredible collection. And please like, comment and subscribe to help us keep this show on the road.